Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Good day, everyone. You're welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning platform, and this is the economics session. I am Jacob Uchenna, your tutor for the subject. For today, we'll be taking a look at the introductory part of economics, as you can see, which is the meaning and scope of economics. To treat the topic with good coverage, we have subdivided it into 6 topics, as you can see on the board here. We have the definitions, basic concepts, relevance of economics, economics as a science, branches of economics, and economic concepts and methods. From here, we'll take the first one, but before we take the definitions, the idea is this. Economics, a whole lot of people look at it as being abstract, but economics is in the daily life of everybody. For instance, you could have 500 naira and you have some needs. Tell me which ones you would do. Use the 500 naira when you are hungry, you have need of food, or use 500 naira to see a movie. What would you do? Okay, best bet. You definitely go for the first one, the food, because it gives you higher satisfaction. So economics just tells you how to manage the things you have much more efficiently and effectively. Now, economics doesn't just go about allocating your resources, it also looks at a larger picture of the whole thing. Yes, it is basically allocating resources, but it also has to do with making sure that you evaluate your needs. You actually look at the ones that are most important and use it to meet the most important need. And the process of arranging your needs and making sure that you meet the most important need, that is what we call in economics, we refer to it as rationality in decision making. Rationality. And rationality, just like I explained, you have to make sure your needs are there, you arrange them and make sure that they meet you. The one you eventually pick is the top of your priority list. So now taking a look at this whole thing, we have to note that resources that we have, there are 2 things in economics. One thing here is your resources, which is like the 500 naira we mentioned earlier. And the other one is the needs or wants. Wants and needs. In economics, we look at this to be limited. Because it is limited in supply, you can't come across it everywhere. We say it is what? Scarce, limited in supply. While wants are they keep on repeating themselves in different forms. That means they are unlimited or insatiable. So now, your task as an economist is to be able to allocate these resources effectively to make sure you take good care of your wants. And that is the basis of the subject economics. Now, coming down to this whole thing, economics is such a subject that has come up with so many definitions, of which we'll try to look at about 5 to 6 of them to do justice to them. Now, the first person whom we always refer to as the father of economics is Adam Smith. Adam Smith came up with the idea that it looks at economics as from a larger point of view and says that economics is an inquiry into nature and wealth of nations. What he was looking at is the cause, why there's a difference between one entity's wealth and another. Why one country could be richer than the other, or one person could be much more productive than the other. Now, the second person we'll look at, someone called Alfred Marshall. these are the authors that defined economics in their own way. And according to Alfred Marshall, economics is defined as the study of mankind in his ordinary business of life. So he looks at economics as something that has to do with what human beings and how they behave, and also how they tend to come to satisfy their own needs and wants. Then the third person we'll look at the third person here is John Stuart Mill, or some would call him J.S. Mill. J.S. Mill says economics is the practical study of production, distribution, and consumption of wealth. And to him, wealth is anything that could be used to yield satisfaction, either to an entity, a consumer, or a producer. Okay? Now, the fourth person here, we have Professor A.C. Pigou. Actually, his full name is Arthur Cecil Pigou. And the professor of economics came up with his own definition and says that economics is the branch of human welfare that deals with the direct acquisition, of requisites that are relevant for material well-being. Now, what does that stand for? It talks about how you use your resources to acquire your wants, your needs, and how you make sure that what those needs are, that whatever you acquire is useful for you. And the fifth person, Mr. Davenport, looked at economics as, according to him, he has a definition. He said that economics is defined as the study of phenomenon, that is, situations, from the standpoint of price. And the last and most important person is Lord, okay, he is a professor as well, professor, and he's a Lord, Lionel Robbins. Lionel Robbins was the first man to ever give a definition that is regarded as most acceptable, and I'll tell you why. Lionel Robbins defines economics as a social science that studies human behavior as the relationship between the ends and scarce means, which have alternative uses. So according to Robbins, he says economics is the social science that studies human behavior as the relationship between ends and scarce means, which have alternative uses. Now, the first reason his definition was accepted as the first most acceptable definition of economics because it covers two things. Remember earlier on we mentioned two things: scarcity of resources, and you have to make choice among your wants or needs. So this is regarded as the basic subject matter of economics. And economics, any definition that doesn't cover these two then doesn't cut it. It is not acceptable. Then this man came up with the definition that had certain things within it. One, he mentioned ends. He mentioned human behavior. He mentioned scarce means. Then he mentioned alternative uses. These things mean that the first thing, ends means wants. Human wants that are insatiable, unlimited, very wide. As you satisfy one, the other thing arises and keeps on going. As you advance, other things also come up. Then there are the human ones we mentioned earlier. Then scarce means talks about the available resources, the means to the ends. Then what it now means that every resource must have different ways you can use it. No unit of your resources has a specific use. It is you that decides how to use the resources that are available. Now, after that is about the definitions of economics. But he also said something about what? Being human behavior. That is why economics was referred to as a social science, because it looks at how human beings behave whenever there's a change in the environment. Anything could change within the environment. Factors that affect human beings make up the human being's environment. So which means things like price. Price could make a human being behave. For instance, the 500 naira that could get you 2 plates of food could be increased. When it increases, then you have to adapt to the change. Then that means you have to change the pattern of behavior. So his definition was regarded as most comprising definition of economics. Now, looking at the other things, from what we've done so far, we would like to test your knowledge on what we've learned so far. So the next thing you're going to see, you see a couple of questions. You have a look at it and I'll get back to you. You're welcome back, everyone. Now, for the concluding part of our study, here we've treated the various definitions and what economics is all about. So we'll be having a look at the basic concepts of economics. Now, when we talk about the basic concepts are actually talking about when something is basic, it means the fundamental things that are fundamental to a concept or things that are fundamental to an ideology. So they are talking about fundamental ideas or fundamental things that relate to the study of economics as a subject. So these basic concepts are: one, we have wants and needs. 2, scarcity. 3, scale of preference. 4, choice. 5, opportunity costs. Now, these are the basic concepts of economics. The first one, wants. One would ask why there's wants or needs. Actually, they are related concepts but differ. The general idea is that needs and wants are the same thing, but no. I'll tell you that wants are the actual things that are unlimited because they keep on evolving. But needs could be limited. Needs are the basic things required by human beings or for life to go on. All right? But wants are the specific items, the specific things, commodities that are needed to satisfy a specified need. For instance, I could need mobility. That's a need. But mobility could get you could want a car, could want a bicycle, a tricycle, and so on. A car could come in different variants, Toyota, Benz, and so on. But this is a need. These are wants. Okay, another example of a need, I could have shelter. Shelter is a need. But a want, you talk about room apartments, mini flats, duplex, and so on. Now, that is talking about the difference between needs and wants. So, in economics, as a basic concept, wants is defined as a specific state of human desire that yearns for satisfaction. It's the human desire that yearns for satisfaction, and in economics it's referred to as what being unlimited. Human wants are unlimited or insatiable. Now, going down quickly to scarcity. Scarcity is simply referred to as limited in supply. That is how scarcity is defined, meaning that things, resources, or things that you can use to satisfy your needs or wants are not found everywhere, but are limited in supply. You can't find it. It is not in abundance. It is not in economics. Everything that is a resource, money, time, energy, is limited in supply. Not until it becomes scarcely unavailable or unavailable, then we would say it's scarce. No. Now, so resources are scarce while wants are unlimited. So limited and unlimited. The next one, scale of preference. Now, you have checked your wants and you've checked the resources you have, that they are scarce. Then we have to relate them. Before we make a decision, we have to check what are the things that you actually need and what are their levels of importance. So in other words, the scale of preference talks about the orderly arrangement, if possible in a table, the orderly arrangement of needs in their order of priority, and another word for that is importance. Orderly arrangement of needs or wants in their order of importance, so that an individual or an entity can make rational decisions. That is what you refer to as the scale of preference. Choice comes after the scale of preference has been prepared and you have considered the quantity of resources we have. So choice is a decision to invest one's resources to a selected want to satisfy a particular need or want among so many others. So which means there are different other wants, but you want to pick out one or more than one, but not all of them definitely, that the resources, the scarce resources can actually meet. So, and that is talking about what? Scale of preference. Okay, choice, pardon me. Choice talks about a decision made by an entity or individual to satisfy a selected want or a couple of wants at the expense of the other from a scale of preference. So that is that about choice. Individuals can make choice, that is households can make choice on how they spend their money. Firms, that is companies and production units, can make choice on how they invest their resources and capital, while the government has to also make choices on the levels or sectors of the economy to satisfy and the ones that have to take less attention. Okay, coming down to the last one, that is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost talks about, recognizes the fact rather, that there are so many wants and resources have alternative uses. So in other words, after your scale of preference has been prepared, you have to make a choice. And after making a choice, there are certainly some other needs or wants that are left unsatisfied. Now, those needs or wants that are left unsatisfied are referred to in economics as the opportunity costs. The opportunity cost, by definition, is defined as the alternative forgone, which means the alternative or the other thing that you would have done with the same unit of resource that you used for something else that you chose to do. And it is also referred to as the real costs. So that is as against what people think. And that's why economics is actually different. So as against what people think, that real cost is the amount you spend. No, an economist looks at the real cost as the opportunity, what you would have gained from another thing that you did not satisfy. So opportunity cost referred to as the real cost or the foregone alternative. Now the next subtopic, which is the third one on our list, we have the relevance or importance of economics. Now, this subtopic comes from the question, why do we study economics as a discipline, as a subject? Now, the first things you ask yourself, what advantages does you, an individual, derive from having the knowledge of economics or from the things we've discussed earlier? Secondly, what can an organization derive from that? Okay? And thirdly, in what ways do the governments benefit from the knowledge of economics? Now, first things, economics gives the background knowledge on proper and effective allocation of limited resources among competing wants. That's the first, number one. And secondly, economics helps firms, productive units, or companies as we would call them, to be able to invest their resources in the most profitable way, because the motive for firms is to make profit. Thirdly, the knowledge of economics guides economic units, that is the individual firms or governments, on rationality in their decisions. That means it helps them to make rational decisions. Fourthly, that's number 4, the study of economics gives the society an idea of how the economy works. That is, how the different sectors of the economy are related to the other and how the economy is designed to achieve their goals. The 6th one, the study or knowledge of economics enables a society to be able to make comparisons in its level of productivity of its resources with other ones. And another one, for firms as well, it helps them to be able to decide what methods of production to use and how the proportion to use them, as the various resources they should the proportion they should combine them, and so that the goals of production can be achieved. Now, the next subtopic we'll be looking at from our list is economics as a science. We would say, what is a science? Science, most authors or the dictionary says, the science is an organized body of knowledge. Now, the organized body of knowledge we are talking about means that it is not just a random knowledge, no. It is not knowledge from any ignorant decision, no. But science, the knowledge of science is obtained from a careful and systematic study conducted, right, through careful research. Now, economic theories and laws. Economics is actually a science because it takes time to look at the whole thing concerning the human behavior, how human beings respond to stimulus from the environment. It observes the human behavior at different time intervals and what makes it change and what it makes it not to change, and how it adapts to those changes. Now, from those things, theories and laws are established in the study of economics, just like in physics or chemistry where you have laws and theories as well. So, but the difference between economics and other sciences. For one, economics has been branded by Robin's definition as a social science. It is different from physical or natural sciences. For one, economics, the lab for conducting economic studies is the open world, the market, the environment. But natural or physical sciences make use of the specific laboratories. Then, economics theories actually changes. That means it's quite dynamic because there are things that could change in the real world that hasn't been there economic-wise, and it definitely affects or changes some things. For instance, there are some rules, there are some laws in economics that have exceptions to them. And the reason for the exceptions is just because of the changes that occur anytime there are new phenomenon within the environment. So which means while physical sciences could be static in their laws and theories, economic or social sciences like economics, are dynamic. Okay? Now, the economics as a science as well, why it is also a science. We just differentiated economics as a social science, and that is why it is not seen as a natural science, why it is different from other science subjects. But now, in what other way what other properties does economics have that we actually call it a science? Sciences, like we said earlier on, the first thing, in the scientific theory, we have observation. Observation. After observation, we have hypothesis. I guess. Then you have experimentation. Then conclusion, before a theory can be established. Now, observation and hypothesis, the same thing in economics. Economics makes hypothesis that is more like a general statement about things around. Or for instance, that whenever prices increase, people demand less. Or whenever prices increase, producers are happy because they make more profit from stock that are in the warehouses. But based on the observation, people could make general statements. But the difference here is the word experimentations. The experimentation in economics happens, like we mentioned earlier, in the open world, in the market. Okay? You could get to the market and adjust some things, some parts of the market, to see how individuals would respond to that part of the market or such activities. Then you would have one of it, which the scientists call the control, so that you'll be able to measure the difference. So based on whatever you find out between the affected part and the controlled part, then you make up what? A conclusion. And when the conclusion is able to be applied in more than one area, then it becomes a theory. And the theory, after being tested for validity, becomes a law. That is where we have law of demand, law of supply, law of this, law of variable proportions and stuff. So that is why economics is a science, and the differences between economics as a social science and economics, that is, as a social science from other natural sciences. Now, the next one here, economics basically has two basic branches or areas of study. That is just what it talks about. The branches of economics just talks about the areas of study, the various divisions of the whole study of economics. And the first one we have is divided into microeconomics and macroeconomics. The first one is more like studying the cells or the individuals and how they relate with each other, while the second one looks at the whole system, the way the whole system functions. Now, with other systems. Now, meaning that microeconomic studies units, while macroeconomic studies aggregates. I'll take them one after the other. The first one, microeconomics, by definition, is the branch of economics that studies the individual economic units and how they relate with the other, as well as how different equilibria, that is plural of equilibrium, is established in various aspects of various markets within a society or a system or an economy. Meaning that things that you study, when you study microeconomics, you talk about things like consumer behavior theory. You talk about demand theory of demand. You talk about theory of supply. You talk about markets and theory of production and price theory, price system. Now, microeconomics, because it looks at establishment of equilibrium and how individual units respond to changes in the environment, which is majorly determined by price, then they are talking about microeconomics. And microeconomics now has been called another name, which is called the price theory. So macroeconomics has been also called the price theory. So looking at everything that has to do with price determination from the consumer side to the producer side and how they interact with each other. On the other hand, macroeconomics is the study of aggregates. It looks at how different aggregates within the economy relate with each other. What are the things that determine them? And what are the things that affect each of them? Now, aggregates we talk about, we no longer look at unit demand or individual demand. We'll be looking at aggregate demand. We won't be looking at unit demand or individual demand. This is for microeconomics. Instead, we'll be looking at aggregate demand, which is talking about the general productive ability or the general demand of all entities or all units within the economy or within a system, how they behave, how each of them behave with each other, and what happens when one factor is affected and how all of them relate with each other. There are different macroeconomic variables, just like we have microeconomic variables, like I mentioned, demand, supply, and so on. Macroeconomic variables looks at what? You have income and employment. That is national income now, not personal income. National income. It also looks at employment. Talking about what? Inflation. Looks at international trade. It also talks about what? Balance of payments and economic growth and development. Now, these are subtopics you could see under macroeconomics. Now, macroeconomics looks at these variables and how they relate with each other. Each of these variables are aggregates. For instance, national income calculates the total output capacity or the total monetary value of the whole units, whole resources within an economy in a year. That is the things when we want to measure national income, we measure our GNP or GDP. That is gross domestic product. So, and employment and unemployment talks about the whole, the aggregate level of the proportion of people within the whole population that are gainfully employed, or those that are willing and able to work but do not have. So we talk about unemployment and employment, then we talk about inflation, which measures the aggregate change or fluctuation in prices. International trade talks about the interrelationship between two or more countries, while the balance of payment talks about the comparison between aggregate proceeds from imports and expenditure, proceeds from exports and expenditure on imports. Now, economic growth and development, okay, I didn't write that. It talks about the different levels, how increase in the size of resources could affect the standard of living and the size and production ability of a country. You see that everything we talked about under macroeconomics talks about the country, the society, aggregate values, percentage values, everything. None of them talks about individual ones or firms or households. All right. So that is talking about micro and macroeconomics. Now, the last but not least of what we are to do under this topic is economic concepts and methods. Now, I guess you'll be wondering, certain words I've been using, terms like economic units, economic system, economy, things like that. There are certain concepts that you really need to know if you must have a good understanding in the study of economics. That is why this subtopic is very important. So, the first among the list, we'll look at this, what we call economic units. Are the basic decision-making agents in an economy or in a society. That means when we say decision-making agents, that means they are the ones that actually manage the resources that are available, determine what the output will be. Now, when we are making these things, the economic units, they own these resources, they procure the resources, they decide the ways these resources would be used. There are three economic agents which are the individual or households, the firm or what we call what? The production units, and the government or state. So whenever a question comes up, what are the basic economic units or the economic units? There are three economic units, which are the individuals or the households, the firms or productive units, and the state or the government. These are the three levels at which decisions are taken. Decisions are taken first by individuals or households on how to use the resources they have locally, within themselves, among their immediate environment. Then the firms decides the kind of output that will be produced when resources are invested into production, while the government determine the rates of economic growth and development through their various activities. Now, going on this subject, we'll deal with different how these three things behave later on. Now, the second concept we'll look at, we have economic activities. We just said that economic units are the different the different decision-making agents within an economy. But now, when we talk about economic activities, these people make use of resources. What do they make use? In what ways are these resources made use of? The different things, avenues that these resources are made use of, that is what we refer to as the economic activities. Now, within an economy, one would have some resources. And of course, at the time, the basic thing is, most resources are definitely, of course, primarily invested. When resources are invested, then they make up inputs turn to outputs. Resources turn to products and services. Let's say investment turns to goods and services. Then these goods and services have to be, the process of turning resources to goods and services, that's the first one we call production. Okay, transformation of resources to goods and services, that's production. Now the second one, which is when these goods and services are produced by the firms in economics, which we will later hear again, that the process of production is not complete until goods get to the final consumers. Now, these things, there's another activity that now needs to be carried out so that the units produced can be taken from where they are produced to where they are needed. And that is what? Distribution. And exchange. Okay? And the final thing, which is talking about the process that completes production process, that is what? Consumption. Because if consumption doesn't take place, then there's a clog or glut in the environment. Then the economy will be static. Nothing goes on. So that means that the economic activities, we have what? Production, distribution, and exchange, and consumption. Economic units, we have individuals, firms, and government. Now, the third one we mentioned, we have the economic system. The economic system talks about, it is defined as a mechanism which determines the allocation or usage as well as ownership of resources within an economy to satisfy or meet certain defined economic goals and objectives. Now, what we are talking about is that an economy exists as a result of interaction of social entities like you and I. And when they exist the way they do, they have to relate. When they relate, they have to perform what? They have to use their resources to meet their needs by performing economic activities. Now, what are the things that regulate? The mechanism that regulates the way resources are owned and the way the resources are used, or yes, within an economy, that is what we refer to as the economic system. So an economic system can be defined as a mechanism that determines the ownership, allocation, and use of resources to achieve certain predefined or established objectives of the society. Now, the next one we'll have there talks about inductive and deductive reasonings. Now, these concepts are two things that are, one is the opposite of the other. But now, some other times, you could make conclusions, you could draw conclusions based, or you could make generalizations based on certain things. It could be a two-directional thing. Firstly, we could look at it, okay, let's put the idea that anytime the local thing we notice, for instance, we say, anytime you see a big dog, then the dog, there's every tendency you'll be afraid of it. Your conclusion is that the dog is wicked and he bites. Why is that? Because possibly you have observed 1, 2, 3 cases of ferocious dogs being huge in size and of the same structure you've just seen. So any other dog you see of such a size to you are dangerous. Now, such a case where a group, you are judging the whole dogs that are huge by a few that you have observed, then we are talking about inductive reasoning. So by definition, we would say that inductive reasoning is a method in economics whereby conclusions or generalizations are reached about an unknown group or population by reason of an observed few or an observed sample. You are using the properties of a little group or sample that you just knew to draw conclusions on a whole group that you are not so aware of. Now, the other side of it is the opposite to that. While this one talks about judging the group using a few, then this one means judging an unknown few using the properties from a group. Now, for instance, I have, we know that whenever you see, okay, I used the dog before. Now, all lions are wild animals, we know that. All lions are wild animals, good. But by the time you see a man playing with a lion, then you think the man is crazy. Because to you, the lion is wild. But the idea is you are trying to attach the property of the group you know to the tamed one that you have just seen. So in other words, you are talking about deductive reasoning. I've just defined inductive. Now let's define deductive. Deductive reasoning is a method of drawing conclusions on an unknown sample or few or units using the properties or characteristics of a known or an observed population. Now, leaving that, we have another one we call what? Positive economics. And the other one, normative economics. Positive economics here is trying to say, I know something, it is always true, that is the way it will happen. That is, positive economics by meaning is a method by which economists conduct studies using facts and not figures. That means established rules and laws, not tested rules and laws. That means those rules you are using are things that have been tested in the past, but you are actually applying it and using it to draw inference or make conclusions on some present study or present problem or research you're conducting. So, in other words, positive economics is the study of what is. That is, what is means the thing that exists. That is the way it is. Okay? So, it uses just facts, but not what? Figures. Now, the second one is the opposite. Normative economics is the methodology in economics, or a method in economics that uses or studies both facts and figures before drawing conclusion on a theory or on an issue, on an economic issue. Now, for instance, here we know that anytime there's increase in price, there must be reduction in demand. But some exceptions, of course, would come when increase in price will mean increase in demand. Yeah, it's dependable. It's dependent on what you're talking about. So, how do we know? If we are using the law of demand the way it is stated, then we are adopting what? Positive economics. But if we are taking a look at observed issues currently and testing them to make sure that it proves the what? The facts or the laws that were established, then we are talking about the normative economic methodology. Well, at this point, we have come to the end of the first topic of study in economics, which is the meaning and scope of economics. Right about after now, you will have some questions pop on your screen and try to make an attempt of them. And in a case where you should have some issues, you're free to go back to the video.